This is Leaders in the Trenches, and your host today is Gene Hammett.
Hi, my name is Gene Hammett. I'm the host of Leaders in the Trenches. My question for you today is, how self-aware are you? What I mean by that is, how aware are you of your own limitations, of your own shortcomings, or your own strengths? The problem is, we think we're very aware, but the reality, the gap between those who actually know their shortcomings and their strengths is very big. When I think about this for you, I want you to think about, what would it be like if you really understood how you're most comfortable with yourself? When you're doing the work that you're most comfortable doing, when you're doing the work that engages all of you, and it allows you to be your fullest potential. Now, don't think that this is just something that's nice to have in business today. Self-awareness is one of the things Gary Vaynerchuk talks about is the most critical thing in business. If you don't know who that is, you can't hardly escape him in my circles, but he is everywhere showing people how to grow this. He's got a business that's over 400 million and he's growing phenomenally. And he talks about self-awareness being the key to his growth. Now, when I say this to you, I want you to think about how are you going to get self-awareness? Well, if you're curious about that, today's the episode for you because we're going to talk about being a self-aware leader. And that is going to be with Dr. Ken Keis. Dr. Ken Keis is an author, and he's got a podcast called Secrets of Success with Dr. Ken Keis. Fancy name. But the guide that I want to introduce you to is someone who is been there with other leaders, has done this for himself, and has going to give you a chance to illuminate a little bit more about who you are so that you can be the leader that you were meant to be. So walk with me on this journey of visionary leadership with Dr. Ken Keis. Hi, Ken. How are you?
I'm great, Gene.
Well, it's good to have you here at Leaders in the Trenches.
Well, it's awesome to serve your audience.
Well, we are excited to have you here. As always, I've already let them know a little bit about you, but I'd love for you to let them know about you as a leader and who you serve.
Well, we serve other individuals who serve other individuals. So we help equip leaders and also professional developers, consultants, trainers, coaches with tools and resources to help other people to live, lead, and work on purpose.
So we recently just recorded an interview for me on your podcast. So tell us a little bit about that podcast and why they should go listen to it.
Well, that podcast is called Secrets of Success with Dr. Ken Keis. And really, we started it. I wanted to have a place where we could bring people like yourself, and by the way, you're awesome, on the show to share with people insights and strategies to improve their leadership, their health and wellness, really to develop the whole person, because that's one of our core belief systems here at CRG is to develop the whole person. If my leadership is better, but my health sucks, that's not so good. If my health is good, but I'm a terrible leader, that's not good either. So how can we develop the whole person? And that's what we try to cover in the podcast, which has now been going for 4 years.
Perfect. Well, when we were deciding what best to talk about this, because there's many areas that which we could both have a great conversation, you said something that really sparked inside me, which was around self-awareness. To set this up, if you're a Gary Vaynerchuk follower, he talks about the most important aspect to his business and what he's doing is self-awareness. Now, when he gets challenged about what that is, he's like, I don't know. I can't really do anything with it because I just know that it's important. Why is it so hard to understand what self-awareness is?
Well, here's the latest research. One of my colleagues, Dr. Tasha, who just did the scientific research, 95% of people watching this video believe that they are self-aware, meaning their impressions, how people see them, they believe that they know that they know. Only actually 10% are correct. So, man, you have over 80% of the population that have a huge gap between how they're showing up and how they see themselves. And that's the challenge, is that our sort of perception of self is skewed. It's not grounded and centered in the reality that's going on. And it's not wrong. Like, I'm not trying to blame people or judge them, but that's the reality, is that 95% of the population who are self-aware are, like, most of them have it incorrect.
Well, I'm not familiar with the study, but before we go too far into this, let's talk, so we get a common understanding of what is self-awareness?
Well, for us, I believe that there's self-awareness in different areas in our life. So there's an internal, but there's also an external. So, one of my colleagues, Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, talks about the reason that leaders aren't successful is they're not getting feedback. So there's this internal self-awareness. Do I know myself? And that's one of the areas we work. We're going to have a free gift for your viewers today on my Quest for Purpose book. Do I know myself? Which is one of the areas you work in, Gene. The other one is, do I know the people around me, and do I know how I come across and how other people see me? And that's where in leadership, there's a huge gap, is that how I perceive myself within that environment. And those are the ones that we primarily focus on.
So there is a lot of overlap in our work, which is good to have you here so that we can learn from each other. So thanks for having me on your podcast.
Oh, you're welcome.
When you think about self-awareness and you're working with someone who understands there's a gap, to me, they probably feel just unsure of themselves. They feel like, well, I thought I knew myself, but something happened, something triggered. What are some of those triggers that allow people to really understand that maybe they're not as self-aware as they need to be?
Well, of course, if you ask for feedback, and I actually have a client meeting this week where one of the owners is going to be removed from the company because he won't own his space. So that's a traumatic event, right, Gene, where that happens, or other people there's little clues. And the challenge is, are we willing to be authentic and real and vulnerable to what's really going on for us? And so there'll be these triggers where I remember working in an organization and they had 100% turnover in the sales team. And the owner said to me, I can't get any salespeople. I mean, there's nobody that's good out there. And I says, do you know there's only one person who is consistently involved with all of this? And that's you. And so there are clues as a leader, if I constantly have turnover or there's this tension at work, those are clues, but do we even look at it? But I want to say one thing, Gene, around it. I don't want to be blaming towards the individuals. The challenge is most people have never been trained or developed or been given the skill set to succeed. They're doing the best that they can, but they haven't been equipped to win. And that's the work that you and I do.
What do you say to those that say, this is kind of nice and good, but we're just here to get the job done. We need to sell more. We need to get more leads. We need to serve our customers. All that stuff is about the doing, not about this self-awareness stuff.
Well, why wouldn't you want to do it where it's easier, get better results? I mean, if you are forcing, we get in this situation where we're just trying to force it. We just want to have this energy behind it. Well, why wouldn't I want to have the team and have ownership so that they have ownership in what is going on, which is what you're teaching? What if I could do it and my work was really joyful and it had fun attached to it? And yes, I want to still get the job done, but if you actually look at the numbers, if I have an engagement, if I have involvement, if I have ownership, I actually do better. My growth numbers go up. So the idea that I can defend this kind of defiant, high tension workspace, there's no evidence to really support that you're getting the highest level of productivity out of them.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, using an analogy, it's like sailing in the wind or with the wind.
Absolutely. How do I use that?
Self-awareness, you're going with the wind, right?
And there are some things, part of the reason that people aren't necessarily completely self-aware is that the question sometimes becomes overwhelming, Gene. So one of the things we do, like we'll have an assessment on personality. Everybody knows about that. And so understanding your personal style, but we also have an assessment on your behavioral values. Well, what does that mean if I could make values-based decisions? But if I know that about myself, then I can also know what motivates other people. And so if I know that, because a lot of times we transfer what we need and want to others, but that's not necessarily the same. Is that if I understand you, Gene, and what drives you, then I can tap into what drives you, not just me.
Well, I think that's one of the keys to leadership, is being self-aware for yourself allows you to understand that you can help others be self-aware for them.
Well, for sure. And then sometimes, there are some areas that we go into as business owners or leaders or as an individual that we really shouldn't be there. And so we get trapped, or you talked about stuck, I think in your business as far as trapped in success, but we get trapped in this space And maybe we need to learn to say no to certain things. If I know myself well, what we teach is my ability to say no is equally or greater importance than my ability to say yes. And so if I'm not there, if that's not my gift, it's not my talent, then why are you asking me to do it? Why am I burdensome? So on a given example, we had an individual who was doing all the detail and the data in the organization, but hated data. Said, why are you doing it? He said, I'm good at it, but I hate it. Well, nobody had even asked him that he hated it. So I'm good at it, but I hate it. Well, long-term, that person's performance is going to go down. You're either going to fire them or they're going to quit. So maybe I need to realign them. How can I play to the best gifts and talents and abilities in the entire team within reason? I mean, life's not perfect. I can't do everything perfectly, but how can I play to the majority? We say, how can I play to your strengths? How do I can play to your natural capabilities and then develop the skills beside it?
You know, I think that a lot of the work that we do comes from the questions that we ask. And I'm curious, what questions would you ask of someone that is on a discovery for their own self-awareness?
Well, one of the things I cover in the Quest for Purpose, I have an entire chapter, a series of questions. So life leaves clues, Gene. So I'm big into journaling. What are the things that really excite you? What is motivating you in life? What events in life or people have you been around that just has been energizing for you? And so we start trying to get you to move towards. Now, Anthony Robbins teaches, what do you want to move away from? So also, what we want is also what we don't want. So here are these things where I hated this, or I disliked that, or that wasn't engaging. So we can remove those things, say, that's not an option to go down there. A lot of times in business, people go into business to earn a lot of money, but it's not fulfilling. And so we talked on our podcast about, does the business own you or do you own the business? And we think about lifestyle, and it's really a place of service. So we can ask those questions. I also ask, what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy? What are interests in our work compel or draw you? You love what you do right now. You don't even have to work, right? That's actually, a lot of people say, oh, I can't believe it. Gene's loving what he's doing. Why do I love being in front of 2,000 people and doing a presentation? I have no idea, Gene, but I know that I do it. That is energizing for me. So everybody listening and watching this is that you have that same opportunity if you filter through it. And then there's one other thing, is that a lot of times we embrace directions or ideas or careers because of peer pressure or social pressure. And so we're going down, Gene, you don't want to start your own business, do you? Are you crazy? You've got your VP of sales of this business. Are you going to start your own company? Why would you ever want to do that? There's no security in that. And so a lot of times there's this sort of external piece. And so we want to hopefully stop the noise and not get or take advice from people who really haven't been there or are not living our lives.
This whole journey of self-awareness, I think never ends, because once you begin to understand yourself, you have to keep going, and you have to keep looking for the new areas at which you are moving to. What are you letting go of? Would you agree to that?
Absolutely. And if we're not growing, then we're stagnant. And that's really not a recommended place to be. We're kind of stuck. And so it is an active tense word. It is continuous. They talk about continuous learning as the number one companies have a continuous learning environment or culture. Well, why is that? Because things are changing. Look at us. We got in this industry, or I got in this industry when there wasn't even the internet. So what the heck? Now we're doing a podcast via video that's going to be on YouTube and all these other platforms out there. This didn't even exist when I got in the business. So this awareness of growing and adapting and being part of what's new out there, that is exhilarating, but also it is, as you say, continuous, never stops.
One of the biggest struggles that companies have is, there's a certain set of companies that just don't adapt well to change. And I see this happening all the time. And frankly, it breaks my heart, because those companies don't hire me, but they really need to. I really focus on companies that want to change and want to embrace that. What do you see that same thing as well within the companies you're talking to?
Yeah, one of my books, Deliberate Leadership, I actually have a chapter called Readiness and Willingness to Change. And it's interesting, those that really struggle, think about what happened with Kodak. And it said, well, somebody came in, by the way, the story is that somebody came in with a digital camera And the executives at Kodak says that's never going to work. People aren't going to want film forever. Now, film is coming back for different reasons, but again, they're not necessarily ready to change and how technology is moving things. I think, you talked about it in our podcast is how can I move out of this state of fear and say, can I move into this courageous spot? Can I move in this place to embrace and say, maybe I don't like to change all of it. I know that sometimes it can be stressful, Gene. Overwhelming change, too much at once can just kind of explode a team. But can I embrace that? And absolutely, my encouragement to the people who are watching, if you want to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you're going to have to embrace the concept of change. That is the one constant, is that there is change. And it doesn't matter what you're going to say, it's going to come.
Now, doing all the work that you do with companies and leaders, I would imagine that you have some exercises that you could do. I'd love for you to think about one that you could kind of introduce us to. Maybe we can't get to the depths of it, but something that you would do with a group or a team or an individual that would help illuminate what we're talking about.
Well, first of all, I mean, when we think about feedback, that's number one. One of my colleagues is Jim Kouzes, who wrote the book, The Leadership Challenge. And we talked about this on our podcast, is that most leaders who are failing are not reaching out for feedback. Gene, how am I doing? What is it that I could do better? Where in my life do I really excel? Do you see? So, and then by the way, as a person receiving the feedback, and this is the courageous part, this is the authentic part, I cannot judge your feedback. In other words, I can't say, Gene, I'm not like that. No. You will simply say, thank you. So how do I, what am I doing well? What could I do better? Where do I excel? What situations do I do my best work? What situations bring out the worst in me? And if you were to coach me and say, what could I develop so I could be a better leader here at XYZ, what would that be? And you need to stand in a space to be neutral so that they can fully share that without fear, without reprisal, without anything. And if you want to go and be courageous, then ask some of those questions and receive the feedback, and then be open to consider some of this to go to the next level.
I want to step into this a little bit with you because you mentioned something about feedback, and I know it's important. I have certainly been around people who don't think it's important, but they do want to get defensive. And you think about it, even like with your wife or your husband or whatever it may be, if you're listening in here, if you're defensive, does that ever go the way you want it to go? And my real point behind this is, if you can do what you suggested, Ken, is stay grounded, accepted in, and just let it wash over you and think about it for a couple of days. Like just that space in between before you even responded to it, other than thank you. Would you agree that that's the biggest thing that you could do with that feedback?
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's easy, Gene. Sometimes people are traumatized by the feedback they get because we've just never gone in this space before. We haven't had the courage, or we were even maybe fearful. So if I don't ask, then I won't know about it. And so absolutely is, by the way, sometimes people's perceptions, you don't have to receive it 100%. You say, thank you, I get it, but don't be judging it. And you 100% correct, Gene, is just stand in that space, stay neutral. If you get defensive, then you're really not asking for feedback. You're trying to judge it. You're trying to filter it. We do a lot of, my partner does a lot of work in law enforcement training, and there's a thing called implicit bias. So all of us have our biases, right? Our belief system. So we want to remove that as much as possible and be neutral territory.
I remember that I was talking to a coach one time, and I was getting some feedback on a big decision I had. And I remember distinctly where I was walking around in my backyard, kind of getting away from everything. And he asked me this question, like, why is that title important to you? I did not like that question. I was like, I deserve that title. When I'm going to do this, I deserve this. I deserve that. And 2 days later, literally, as I kept thinking through the conversation, because all he did was like, okay, you sit with that. And I remember just the self-awareness that it took for me to realize that I wanted to be recognized for that through the title. And then I was able to let go of it because I realized that wasn't the most important thing for me. And so you talking about this just, brings me back to those moments where I have had to be self-aware myself. And I think that we're never going to be you don't put a date on the calendar, say at this date, I will be completely self-aware, because that's just not possible.
No, it is an onion. You're peeling it back. You're going deeper. And here's the other thing, Gene, who we are now, we're different people than 10 years ago. I've been in this for 30 years. When I got in it and I was here for 20 years, I said, oh yeah, well, I'm kind of there. I am so much more aware and deeper and grounded and centered now. And then at my age, I've moved in this space where, yes, I want to share, but I don't need your approval to do it. Where a lot of times where we're so worried about what other people think or say about us, that's what's driving our behavior. And I said, well, this is my life. It's not your life. So this is where over time we are hopefully better people. And that's what you talked about earlier. As consultants and trainers, we in many cases will outgrow our clients. And so you move into another sort of client group because who have you become is not who you were serving. So it's a past tense word, and now you're moving into this new level and hopefully you are growing. So if I started as a consultant at $1,500 a day, I should be moving to 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever the number is, not because of the money, but as a benchmark of my growth, a benchmark of my contribution, a benchmark of how I am serving. And hopefully that's the measurement that's occurring.
Well, I know that you had mentioned when we talked about focusing on self-awareness that one of your books has something in there for them, the Quest for Purpose. Is that right?
That's correct. And so I'm going to give everybody that's watching a free copy of the ebook. They'll go to this URL. I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes. It's my speaker site, Ken Keis, spelled KEIS.com/Gene. I don't know where we got that URL from. So if they go to that, you'll be able to get a full copy download of my Quest for Purpose. I have all the exercises. I actually get people to create an autobiography of their life in all these different categories. And I segment it so that it's consumable. In other words, it's not an overwhelming process. Now, interesting, Gene, I went through this myself in 1988, 89, and I spent 6 months of really kind of transitioning, just as you discovered this development space, through circumstances. I did the same thing. I actually grew up and I had my own dairy farm. Hello. So I'm in a little different space now from dairy farming doing this. Now, I always knew I was going to be a speaker, but in 1989, got into this business as a sales trainer and then have progressed and moved into this space now. So part of that was just taking the time, working on it, not getting anxious about how long it's going to take me to get clear. Just you're moving one step at a time. It's not a problem. So it's kenkeis.com/Gene, and you'll get a free copy of the Quest for Purpose book.
Well, make sure you spell my name with Gene so that you can get your free gift. And Ken, I really appreciate you being here to talk about self-awareness and really help us understand what is it, why it's so important, and give us some of these questions and exercises. It's really been insightful for me as it took me back through some moments where I made some changes and those were very important. So hopefully you're listening in today, you can make those same changes. So thanks for being here, Ken.
Well, thank you.
I love this interview because we got into a lot of things that I wasn't prepared to share with you. I don't have a script about these things, but I just had some realness come out where there's been moments where I have doubted myself, and I wanted to share those with you and really make this special additional video. If you're listening in right now, I don't have it all figured out. So if you think that I'm growing this business and I have grown other businesses, that's true. But I'm on a journey of self-discovery. I am still trying to figure it out. So if you have any questions about what you're doing, I would love to help you. If you're worried about what you're doing next to make this work, I would ask you to look at that a different perspective. Well, who are you being so that you understand yourself a little better and more intentional about who you are showing up as you're trying to achieve your goals, grow the company, grow people around you, Those are the most important things. If you want to have that conversation with me, make sure you reach out any of the social channels at Gene Hammett. I'd love to interact with you. Send me an email. And as always, share the show, lead with courage, and I'll see you next time.